Alright, it is time for my honest thoughts on Pokemon Generation 3. So in this video, we're going to be talking about Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, as well as the remakes, Fire Red and Leaf Green. So I'll be honest with you, when I do these notes, because I really want this to just be my raw, authentic thoughts, I don't really have any notes in front of me. So, because I cannot remember if Emerald came out or Fire Red, Leaf Green came out first, I'm just going to go ahead and talk about the Hoenn games first, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. Then I'll talk about the remakes of Gen 1, especially because I don't really feel like I have a ton to say on Fire Red Leaf Green. At least not compared to the Hoenn games. But anyway, but if I'm taking a guess, I'm pretty sure Fire Red Leaf Green came out before Emerald. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive in. So this was an interesting one. So like in my first two videos, like on my honest thoughts, I had mentioned that a lot of times for Christmas and birthday, I would get a new game. Which, was pretty easy because, like, the Game Boy games, they were like $30 at the time. But this one was a bit harder because now we jump to the Game Boy Advance. And I did not have a Game Boy Advance because I was still, like, just a bit too young at the time to have a job. So, and, Game Boy Advance was a lot more expensive. I think at the time they were about $100. But I did eventually get one with birthday money one year. I got lucky enough. I had just enough to get the Game Boy Advance. But, so when the games first came out, I remember seeing the previews to them. And honestly, I wasn't terribly impressed at first. And I think one factor to that is I was about 15 when Ruby and Sapphire came out. So it was kind of like that age where you don't really want to associate yourself with childhood stuff anymore. And on top of that, I will say what I saw in the previews and like promotional information, it almost felt like a step back. Like, one of the things that made Gold and Silver so cool was the time of day and the real clock feature. Now, Ruby and Sapphire did have a clock, but it was just for berries growing. It wasn't, there was no events by day of the week. There wasn't like the whole, some Pokemon were nocturnal, some could only be caught in the morning. There was none of that anymore. So that felt like a huge step back. And like, I wasn't really a big fan of some of the trainer designs. They eventually grew on me, but like I said, it just wasn't impressed. It just felt like it was taking a step back. I had actually been talking to a friend online at the time, and she had told me, like, hey, we were talking about the games, and she's like, you should give Ruby a chance. It's a lot of fun. And I'm like, you know what? Let me go ahead and give it a try. So thankfully, around that time me and her were talking, I did have a summer job cutting lawns, so I did eventually get enough money to get a Ruby version. I wanted Sapphire. Like, my deciding factor on that was Sapphire is my birthstone, but regardless, I still got the game because none of the stores I went to had any Sapphire versions left. So Ruby it was. And I started playing it, and I will say that, I enjoyed it. It was fun. I mean, it wasn't as fun as Gold and Silver or Red and Blue, but I enjoyed it. More on that later. And also another thing I thought was really cool about Ruby and Sapphire, I personally liked this, was I liked how the evil teams, like, I liked how one was good and the other was bad. Like, so I played Ruby version, so Team Magma were the bad guys and Team Aqua were the good guys. And then vice versa in Sapphire. So I did think that was an interesting feature. I know some people who didn't like that. They thought both teams should have been evil, which, I mean, yeah, surface level they probably should be, but I don't think it's a factor that destroys the game or anything. And at first, some of the new Pokemon, I wasn't a big fan of the designs, but looking back on this, on these games, I actually thought, there's actually a pretty decent variety in the new Pokemon, and it's pretty easy to make a balanced team. Like, it's funny, for a region that's based on a tropical region, they even managed to put some good ice types in the game, which was nice. So I like the variety. I do wish there was more abilities to like trade from other regions, because that was one thing I didn't like about Generation 3 was that I feel like there was this big thing about the national decks. Like you had to like complete the Pokedex, and you could trade from with Pokemon from the previous generations. So I was not a fan of that because sometimes post game content like that, it's like you've done everything. Like the only thing you can really do is go challenge the Elite Four again, or you know play with friends, which, like I said earlier, a lot of people really dropped off the series by that point, so there really wasn't anyone around to play with. And this was right before like online features were a thing, so it's not like I could go online and play against people. So that was a little disappointing. But so then the Emerald version came out. That was really cool. Um, I liked how it was interesting to see both teams being evil. It was interesting how they did that, and also the fact that you could catch the two title legendaries from the previous games, Groudon and Kyogre or Kyogre. It was interesting how you could have catch the two of them in the same game, because in Ruby, Groudon was exclusive to that, and then in Sapphire, Kyogre was exclusive to that one. And you could catch Rayquaza in both of those, but Rayquaza was the title legendary in Emerald, so that was kind of neat. Oh, and speaking of Emerald, I do actually like the trainer designs much better. I think the male trainer design looked much cooler, for sure. They had battle animations back too, which I thought was kind of interesting because, once again, kind of talking about taking a step backwards. Like Crystal version had the battle animations, and then it's like they just didn't do them for Ruby and Sapphire, which I don't think battle animations really make a difference, but it was cool to see, and like I said, just interesting to me that they decided not to do them in Ruby and Sapphire. But the games were fun. I will say I liked that the difficulty level was a little higher. Um, like I thought the Elite Four were much harder. Like they really took me a long time to beat. And I will say this: so Sceptile is actually my favorite Pokemon. Like go figure. On the one game I was on the fence about. But I will say, oh my gosh, if you picked uh, Trico as your starter, holy crap, was that game a challenge. Watson, I think, had to have been one of the worst because all he had were like Magnemites and Magnetons, so like, they were steel and electric. So like nothing Grovyle or Trico could like even do anything against him. I can remember, that I had a Gyarados and I trained it to learn Dragon Rage. Problem there is because Gyarados is water flying, he has 4 times the weakness to electricity. But I did finally beat him. I level grinded like crazy. I was finally able to beat him. Um, and this is a really funny story. I had another friend who had a level 80 Groudon. Once again, was struggling with Watson. He says you can borrow the Groudon to beat him and then just trade him back to me. I'm like, alright, cool, I'm going to do that. Oh boy, about that. So, because I didn't have enough badges, the Groudon did not obey me naturally. And I'm not even joking. Groudon just kept disobeying orders. Magnemite kept hitting me with Sonic Boom. And I couldn't believe it. The third gym leader in the game managed to take out a level 80 Groudon just because it wouldn't obey me. It's one of those things where I wish we had like game capture devices back then. That would have been a hilarious video to post today. Um, so like I said, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald were fun. Music was nice. I liked the setting. Like the region was kind of fun to explore. It's based on the Kyushu region, so it's more tropical, which is also why there's like water everywhere. I know that's kind of the joke, is that Hoenn is trumpets and water, which is definitely a lot. They love the trumpets in their music, which, hey, I think a lot of 2000s bands like that too, so I guess it fits since the game came out in the 2000s. So now let's move on to Fire Red and Leaf Green. So truthfully, I don't really feel like I have too much to say about these that I didn't already have to say about Gen 1. There's a couple points that I do want to make. It was fun to play these games again with like better graphics and better uh, battle mechanics. Because actually, one thing I forgot to mention in the Gen 1 review, or yeah, review, we'll call it that, was that I felt like there was a lot of glitches and bugs in the game. Especially red and blue. Yellow, I feel like it fixed a lot of that, but definitely red and blue. One of the most glaring issues I felt in red and blue was the fact that I felt Psychic was way too overpowered. In fact, I remember like all the booklets, all the guides kept saying, bring a bug type or a ghost type to fight Sabrina. Well, that's kind of a problem when there's only 3 ghosts in the whole game with the Gengar line. I mean, sorry, well, yeah, Gengar, but the Ghastly line, they're all ghost poison, so they get absolutely massacred by Sabrina. But I can remember I brought a Haunter to fight Sabrina and tried to use Lick, and it said does not affect the enemy. So you mean to tell me the thing that's supposed to be weak or strong against Psychic is, doesn't even do anything? And then the problem was there was only 2 other ghost moves in the game. Confuse Ray, which just confuses, and then there was Nightshade. But Nightshade was one of those abilities that does damage based on the user's level. So, I'm sorry, the opponent's level. So, it's not like that really does any typing advantage. And another one, too, was, once again, it said dragons were strong against dragons. You had one dragon move in the whole game, and that was Dragon Rage. And that always did an automatic 40 damage, like, regardless of typing. So, I'm glad they fixed that. Now, I guess you could say they fixed that in Gen 2 with bringing in Dark and Steel types, plus adding more Ghost Pokemon, and then as well as more Dragon type moves and more Ghost type moves. So I'm glad they fixed that in Generation 1. Because that was a thing, I guess. Another thing, too, was, and I kind of mentioned this when I was talking about Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. The whole thing with Fire Red, Leaf Green was the fact that one of the gimmicks was supposed to be like, oh, you can bring the Kanto Pokemon to the Hoenn games, but once again, you had to like complete the Pokedex to trade, which I felt kind of defeated the purpose of it. And once again, like just like with the Hoenn games with Fire Red Leaf Green, there really wasn't a lot of post-game content. I mean, there was the Sevi Islands, but really everything was just go fight the Elite Four again. And so that was a bit disappointing. Oh yeah, and there's something very interesting. So going back to Gen 1, so when the games originally came out in Japan, it was a red and green version. And then they did the blue version, which had like different like encounters. They rearranged some dungeons or levels. And they also updated the graphics. Now, when we got the games, we got red and blue. But we got blue versions, Pokemon sprites. So I remember the word on the street the whole time was the reason we never got red and green was that they said green did not do great in Japan. Well, I gotta say, I don't agree with that. Actually, oh, getting ahead of myself. So, I later heard, and I heard this within the last year, that the whole reason that the US got the blue version instead of the green one is they felt that blue would be a more popular color in America, which honestly makes a lot of sense. I mean, red and blue, that's basically American colors. So it makes sense that that would be why we got that. Even though our blue version in the US really is just the green version with updated sprites. And plus, the other thing too is like, Pokemon was such a global phenomenon, I cannot imagine that one game, red version did phenomenal while green just absolutely flopped. I don't believe that. And the other thing too, so the reason I also believed that that story too was, pretty much I feel like games a lot of times just get released worldwide on the same day. But back in the day, like, especially with Nintendo, like, if a game did not do well in Japan, they did not even waste their time releasing it in the US. So, I mean, it made sense. But, yeah, so Fire Red Leaf Green, I enjoyed those. Oh, and I like that they added other stuff in there, too, like you could do breeding, because, that was added to Gen 2. But, yeah, Gen 3 was good. I think, now where would I rank Gen 3? So like I said, we're counting Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, as well as Fire Red, Leaf Green. I'm not going to count remakes too much when it comes to ranking the generations. But I think, as of right now, because also I feel with Gen 3, while I was skeptical about them at first, I do feel I've grown more of an appreciation for them. But, just like all things, I feel like they got a little outdated at a point. So, let's see. I think for right now, I am going to go ahead and put Gen 3. I think I'll rank it as number 4 for right now. Like I said, this list is definitely subject to change. But, yeah, for right now, I'm going to go ahead and say it's 4. Better graphics, lot less bugs, and just better gameplay mechanics. So stay tuned as we take care of the Sinnoh region here.